Hey, hello, and welcome everybody to another episode of the Earthen podcast. I'm Scott Howard with earthenhand.com, and today my guest is Jay Dubinsky from the Energime Group, and they produce a wide variety of cutting-edge technologies in the energy, desalination, housing, generally humanitarian angle of this company. So thanks for being here, Jay.
So, I figured the more people I train in different areas, you never know. I might get a client next week over there in Oregon or Washington. I'll send you off. I was just conferring with Dan today because I got to send somebody off to represent Red Sun to London next week, as a matter of fact. And I don't know anybody in London. So,
Yeah.
So consider yourself a Red Sun trainee, okay? So.
That's right. That's the idea. Yeah, I'm wearing my red shirt, so
I didn't notice. Yeah, you're right on time in the sync. Okay.
We've talked a few times, but I don't know your accolades or anything, buddy.
I'm a medical doctor, which allowed me kind of to leapfrog into the biotech world. But let me start from, to give you a little more background. I started basically, like most Jewish boys, to become a doctor, right? And so I'm studying away like mad. And I had started actually as a long-haired musician, actually. And it was because of that actually I turned out to be a better engineer than a doctor, because my math was, well, it led me to be the top mathematician at UCI for 2 years, because it turns out in neurobiology that when you use the same part of the brain when you're composing and playing music as you do when you're doing differential calculus equations, and I'm not talking algebra, I'm talking about higher math and higher physics. It's called the locus coeruleus. It lights up, when they do EEGs, the same exact spot in the brain as when you're playing music and reading and writing music. So I had been a musician since I was like 10, and I played bass. And then when I had a girlfriend, I stole her Les Paul, learned the guitar, playing along with, George Benson and all kinds of blues and rock. Yeah, I must have played Breezing like 7 million times. Okay. But in any case, when I hit UCI, basically it was effortless for me to do mathematics. And I think that was partly because my dad was a code breaker in the war. And it turns out that I inherited his mathematical abilities, which, it's half genetics, right? And then half environment. Okay, so my brother had a very terrible car accident when I was a sophomore in college, and he became a paraplegic. And so the doctors had no solution. Modern medicine, even today, has almost no solutions. And this was before stem cell science, took up some of the slack there. So my solution was to use engineering and maybe put chips, in his spinal cord to get him to walk. So I decided to be a double major and study engineering. And luckily I did, because that led to my real career. And I did research at the university in medicine, and I did a lot of research for pharmaceutical companies because I had wormed my way into the top neurobiology lab there called the Center for Learning and Memory, run by Dr. McGaugh and Dr. Gary Lynch. I was their electron microscopist. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I learned very fast, as all of us in the world have now, how crooked the pharmaceutical industry really is and how bad these drugs are. So it turned out that I didn't practice medicine because I didn't see that it was a holistic, real science of my heart. You know, yes, my ego said be a doctor, but I, I saw it was hurting people.
Sure.
So I turned to engineering. You know, I turned to wanting to save, you know, the earth, wanting to do, you know, to be a creative person again. So, you know, to be an inventor. And so that kind of led my career into the engineering field. And luckily, very early on, I had a very good friend who was Japanese, and he was my go-between for dozens of different, or maybe even up to 100 different Japanese firms that I work with in water treatment, waste treatment, water purification, because they're leaders in that industry. And after about a decade of that, it led me to actually doing work with Toyota racing team, Mazda racing team, Honda racing team to develop hydrogen systems, and led to the mad gas, which was my claim to fame in 2000. And then later to, you know, want to try and make, you know, oil and out of algae, which led to Origin Oil. So it was a very, let's say, wandering path. You know, I was just kind of like a musician, just going with the flow. And in the meantime, I had patented the mad gas, and we developed the hydrogen engine for Mazda, the RX-8, and then I kind of dropped it for a while and went into real estate. And then in 2008, you know, we had the crisis. But by then, I was also developing in Brazil a 50 million gallon algae farm, and trying to make Origin Oil go to the scale that I thought it needed to go, you know. And that kind of faltered because even though the textbooks say differently, really there's only about 2% oil in algae on the average, and it's very difficult to grow. Yes, the real truth is that 2 to 3% is your typical oil content. And so none of these algae things could scale up effectively, even though we developed the best equipment, you know, the quantum fractionation, you know, my patents with Nick Eckelberry and developing that. And even though we developed this, you know, a top 10 biotech company, it wasn't productive as far as I was concerned on an industrial scale. It wasn't until 2018 that I came back to algae, actually through the back door, because I was in Dubai and I was there getting financing for our power plants. And I came on June 16th, on the one day and only day that the university had announced that they discovered the biggest black hole in the world, in the ocean. And it was an algae dead zone as big as Scotland, 63,000 square kilometers of dead algae encrusted total anoxic soup. It was completely orange, yellow, and on the bottom of the sea, every skeleton of every fish, mammal, whale, dolphin you could see, just bones littered, but nothing living, no coral, not a thing was living. And I was in complete shock. And so I completed my mission there, and I got a commitment from the Dubai Investment Trust. They said, okay, come back with insurance, which I've subsequently, got for Red Sun. And then, we're happy to fund you. Okay, but meanwhile, I went home and I'm thinking of this problem. This is not a problem even on an industrial scale. This is on a, I don't even know, a country scale. Okay.
Yeah.
I was in shock, but I kept working on it evidently, even when I was sleeping in my subconscious.
Sure.
And Dan, I had just started studying under Dan, for like a year and a half, mathematics of phi, and yeah, and that on top of 6.5 years studying under Dr. Andre in pyrolysis in Latvia, where I previously had lived before I went to Spain. I studied how to build pyrolysis, how to make composites, how to formulate composites, for waste, the recycled housing panels, as you know. And
yeah.
I put the two together miraculously. I don't know how it even came to me. It just kind of, I downloaded it from the universe. I'm not sure exactly how it happened, to tell you the truth, Scott. But I was able to figure out, because I had 3 Nobel Prize winning teachers, in chemistry and physics. So I did have the knowledge. It was just buried, deep. And it came out all of a sudden, and I figured out using Dan's star child, where he shrinks the star child and he collapses into another symmetry, right?
Right.
So
That star mother
I
kit.
use that as a model to do that. Yeah, the star. Yeah, and it was Nassim Harriman also who introduced that to me even 5 or 6 years before that. So it was always on the back of my mind, I guess. So putting all that together abstractly, I started looking at this cerium oxide complex with magnesium and iron, but basically it's a certain kind of crystal that basically can take a quasi-crystal format where it can be in 4 or 5-sided symmetry. 5 or 6-sided symmetry. And it turned out that it was heat that was what could morph it from one symmetry to the other, just like calcium. When you take calcium lime, you change the symmetry of the calcium crystal so it forms cement. Okay, so under 1400 degrees. So in this case, my crystal takes a lot more heat than that. It takes 2000, which normally would be impossible, except with the red sun. So I was undoubted, I wasn't bowed by the high heat. And I kept working on it, and lo and behold, it works. And not only does it work, but it works like hundreds and hundreds of times. So you can take this crystal and kind of set it like a trigger on a gun, and it shoots out sparks, actually. And basically it donates up to 3 electrons at one time instead of like normal catalyst. So basically it's an electrocatalyst of, like, it turns out 7 times more potency than platinum ruthenium in terms of breaking down biomass. Okay, and this is what it's about. And biomass in particular, that's the most hard to break down, is algae. Okay, so I didn't care about biomass, although there's plenty of biomass available. I was living in Brazil, where every mile has got like 100,000 tons of biomass sitting on the ground. Beautiful biomass.
And then you discovered this method, so you had to put it to use, right?
Yeah. So, but the real truth that I discovered, and I had known this for a long time, actually working with algae, because there's a lot of secrets you learn on the way, is that there's also about 6 or 7 times more hydrogen in algae from the sea than algae from the terra firma, because we came from the sea, everything came from the sea. And so it turns out that hydrogen is more plentiful from the sea. So if you use algae from the sea, again, it multiplies your results. So instead of having just 7 times better results, you got like 50 times better results in getting hydrogen out of algae.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So instead of 2%, even with efficiencies, you might be getting 7 or 8% out, which is, by weight, that's a magnanimous occurrence, because hydrogen is very hard to get, in most substances. Yeah. And so now this is my new platform, and we've even gone one step further now, because in fact I'm meeting with the Minister of Ag here next week, Marcos Jr., and the Ministry of Ag are very interested, because if you can make hydrogen, which I can at about 70 cents a kilo, which is 3 times cheaper than hydrogen from methane. In my case, I'm making it from the syngas, from the algae, or from sewage sludge, or from biomass from trees. I can make it from anything. But the algae from the sea is solving a huge problem. And the sargassum is another algae problem.
Yes, the sargasso is now filling the Atlantic. So it's like, if we can even make a little dent in that, help balance the ecosystem while generating some hydrogen, that would be great.
No, I could definitely do that. And, but I wouldn't do it from the US. I'd do it from, Dominican Republic and, St. Thomas, and, save the Caribbean, save Colombia.
I've been telling people about it in Mexico, and,
exactly,
generating some interest.
I would go to Mexico in a heartbeat. Also, Colombia, I think, was where I was planning to do the first plant. On the canal in Cologne. But in any case, it doesn't matter. You can take 700 or 800 tons of that seaweed, and with the catalyst, get about 0.8 liters of hydrogen for each gram that you dry.
Right.
So after you dry it, which again, the red sun dishes help you dry it, very cost effectively. And it just so happens that I have all the perfect, red sun kilns, red sun ovens to make the catalyst. It just seems like I was the perfect guy. That's why I guess God said, okay, download this now, here's your final piece. Yeah, but anyway, with the cutting to the chase, is if you can make the cheapest hydrogen in the world, you can make the cheapest fertilizer in the world. Mm-hmm. And that is the real crux of what has gone terribly wrong here in Asia. Right now, in the Philippines, fertilizer prices tripled to $700 a ton. It's putting farmers into the red, okay? Yeah. And it's caused food prices here to spike like crazy. In fact, food here now is twice as much as it was even in Thailand a few months ago. That's what I found. Yeah, it's very scary, okay? Because even 10 years ago, the average poor person in Philippines was spending about 40% of their income on food. So imagine what they're spending now. So,
are you there now in the Philippines?
And just last month, the gas went up again and everything. Yeah, I'm here in Manila, in Quezon City. So that's my new we just set up a company here, Red Star Energime Green Group. So we have a company already set up. And so now with the hydrogen, my plan is to turn all the hydrogen, other than this, using some of it to make electricity, obviously, and selling to the grid or charging batteries, to take the majority of it and make fertilizer for like 25 or 30% below market.
Okay.
So
wow, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Well, that's the new thing, because dealing with hydrogen after you make it is impossible. Okay, you can't store it effectively without leaks, without explosions, and you lose about 30% just putting it in the compressed state, let alone liquefying it. And that's got to be the craziest thing in the world, And then what do you do with it? No train can take it, no ship can take it. You got to have special everything, So, which costs a fortune. Whereas when you convert it to, let's say, anhydrous ammonia, you can put it in burlap sacks. You can take it on a donkey. So it's a completely different animal. But really, just like you and your organization, we're a quasi, save the earth kind of company. In this case, it's save the farmers. Okay.
Yeah, just try to help humanity a little bit here. Yeah, get some solutions.
Well, they're up against it. There is no country right now that's not suffering. Even in Germany now, the price of fertilizer there is $954 a ton. $900 a ton. Imagine what your food's going to cost.
Yeah.
And so it's completely getting rid of the middle class. It's just, if they're not already destroyed. Okay. Now, I'm not even paying attention to what's happening in the US, but I bet you, if you look up the price in the US, I bet it's around the 700 mark too, because it follows the price of natural gas, because that's how they make it. They reform methane. And of course, that's the dirtiest business in the world. So on top of the fact that we can basically now make it so that you can transport it with any, donkey or truck, or, you can move it across borders, you can move it without permits, it's a normal commodity. But more importantly, they're seriously, they're talking about using ammonia to run ships. And the red sun was born to, clean up the oceans. So if this is the real plan, because they can't think of anything better, really, it's kind of like a process of elimination. If this is how they're really going to clean up the shipping business, then this is also, we're hitting the bullseye and we're splitting the arrow in the middle of the bullseye.
So are you talking like an ammonia, like a steam engine that runs with ammonia as the medium?
Well, actually, there's several different things going on. One is that Cummins, Rolls-Royce have already developed ammonia engines. Hyundai and Toyota have teamed up to make a hydrogen engine. So you can do two things. You can run the ammonia in these special engines, but second of all, you can decompose the ammonia, and it's actually 50% denser in hydrogen than hydrogen itself, because you have NH3. So you deliver the ammonia, and then they break it back into hydrogen, and you run a hydrogen engine. Okay, or you run a special ammonia engine, okay, which all the manufacturers are racing to make now. So it's assumed that they would make those, because
you can't store hydrogen. And they also want to use it for aviation. If they try and use liquid hydrogen at minus 253 degrees, they'd have to redesign the entire plane. Well, nobody's going to do that. And that would take 15 years. The only way is Rolls-Royce has developed already, you can look it up online, an ammonia turbine, believe it or not. Also, in Japan, one of the main institutes working with Honda, I think it was, has developed, and I know Honda has also done it in Korea. They've developed ammonia turbines. So, but Rolls-Royce, of course, provides quite a lot of engines for the airline industry. So they're probably the first to be able to take advantage because they have contracts. So basically you run a turbine that runs on ammonia instead of jet fuel. So that would make some sense.
That's the first I've ever heard of that.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised how this hydrogen, as I call it, silliness, has taken over the world. Ammonia, at least, is not going to blow up your plane. Okay, hydrogen is. Believe me, the first time the pilot and the co-pilot get simultaneous phone calls with the stewardess and it triangulates on a hydrogen tank, it's over. It's over. For that flight.
So,
for that flight.
Let me stop you for a minute because, you know, I feel like I'm tracking what you're saying, but I'm wondering, you know, our audience isn't quite caught up. So let's just make a list of all the technologies that you've worked with so far through Red Sun and the Energime Group. I know you have the infrared focusing collection of energy. You were storing heat in a solid molten metal medium, running like steam power plants and running diesel engines converted to run on steam, right? Which is the original diesel technology. And then we talked about the algae burning, burning sargasso, biomass. And you're also working with the composite materials and super low cost, efficient housing. That's why you're in the Philippines right now, right? Partially is to do these composite panel houses.
Well, that is going to come up in the second chapter, and the El Nino is about to start, is that we've already run out of water. So they're tapping these polluted lakes here, and they're all at dangerously low levels. And second of all, there's a brownout or blackout every single week. So they don't have enough electricity. At the same time, they're closing all their coal plants. So we have an electricity and energy crisis here, which is causing industrial companies to shy away from the Philippines and not invest. And in fact, the industrial sector of the Philippines is the smallest in all of Asia. So they basically skipped the industrial age and gone right to the service economy, which luckily they have the biggest service sector of any Asian country, which is temporarily made up for that shortfall, but it's not sustainable. And it's, you know, AI is coming and it's going to take away all those jobs. But it's kind of switched because of all these crises, because we have one, the El Nino, which is causing drought, and all these cities are running out of water. And so I will go into some detail now on the Red Sun infrared solar desalination. Now, the beauty of the Red Sun infrared is that it's a new kind of black body receiver that is utilizing the new nano graphene CNT technologies and material science, which allows you basically to have a superconductor of heat that is able to also absorb heat in a black body system of the entire spectrum of the sun. So unlike most solar receivers, they only receive in the visible spectrum, even though the dish or the trough may be reflecting a big part of the solar spectrum, including the infrared. The receivers are not able to receive that energy and transmit it to your turbine. So in fact, most of your big dishes are only at about 600 to 760 degrees. Whereas with our 22-meter dish, with our special black body receiver, which is patented now, we're able to reach 1700 to 1800 degrees centigrade. So that's 1,000 degrees different, because we're able to focus and to collect the infrared for the first time.
Yeah.
That's why it's a patent. Even on the troughs, instead of 500 or 600, they're going to 1100 degrees. And we can retrofit any off-the-shelf dish or trough with these black body receivers. So the beauty is, yes, we can take now 2,500 square meters, like 3 or 4 parking spaces, let's say, and make about 3 million liters of desalinated water with our special low energy desalination units. And this is a new patent also, which basically combines our microbubble technology, which of course also was from the algae business, our quantum fractionation using the ultrasound created by the popping microbubbles. Well, in this case, we're creating ultrasound and heating water also, and basically popping those bubbles after the salt has been basically subsumed or sucked into the bubble and to the periphery of the bubble where the air bubble interface is. And by popping that bubble, it precipitates out the salt very, very efficiently. And the configuration is that it basically is in a very low heat laminar flow venturi, so that the sucked water vapors after the bubble is popped are sucked into this venturi, and then they are fed into a chiller, which condenses the warm vapor and gets fresh water. And this whole method, called forced evaporation, is mimicking nature. And so it's just like the red sun, super efficient. In fact, it takes very little energy at all, so that now we're using super efficient solar, super efficient desalination, and then super efficient precipitation of the salts, just using nanobubbles, which, as you can imagine, is super low energy to make nanobubbles. It is blowing bubbles. Any baby can blow bubbles. So we are able to make, like I said, with just a bunch of desalination dishes, or the red sun dishes, 3 million liters a day. And then we supplement it, because it's low energy, with lithium sulfur batteries for another 4 hours. So we actually get 16 hours out of a day of it operating. And there you go. And all of that fits in a 20-foot container, except, the dishes would sit outside the container, obviously. But basically, it's a mobile desalination unit. It can go on the back of a truck. It can use a temporary permit. As you know, it's impossible to get permits, permanent desalination, in California, in fact, they're tearing up all their desalination units. You're not getting any permits. So in this case, you can set it up in one day. You know, don't even ask for a permit. And
Is
as
this a
I'm
product? Is this on the market now? Can we buy this shipping
Yes.
container? And wow.
yes, they're being made in the UAE actually, and in fact, I'm working through Dan. I've been introduced as the architect of NEOM, so they're looking at it. You know, the new linear city that Saudi Arabia is building. So Saudi Arabia is a case where they've already burned through 4/5 of all their groundwater in the last 20 years. So they're going to completely run out of water in less than 13 years. Yeah. So they have to start getting serious about desalination. And already they're importing food because they don't have the water to grow it. Okay, but another case is here right now. Metro Manila is basically taking dirty lake water that's completely polluted, and so we're proposing with the DENR to put one of these units and basically desalinate the water with the system for the drinking water, because number one, the water is not even going through the pipes. It's like a septic tank that hasn't been flushed for 30 years. Okay, so part of it is sewage is going in, development has come in, and they're just dumping it to the lake. But also, they just recently announced that there's microplastics, 20 parts for every cubic meters. So that's going into drinking water. Well, that's going to be a disaster if people start drinking that. So this is an example where the nanobubble precipitation can get rid of the microplastics, okay, and precipitate them out. Yes, because with nanobubbles, it's not about the weight. We don't care if it's fairy weight or it's a clump of lead. Okay, it's going to precipitate out based on the bubble dynamics, the physics of popping bubbles. And so it's not
desalination and water purification at the same time. Is that right?
So it's not only precipitating out the solids, it'll precipitate anything that basically has a static charge, which plastic does, because the static charge is glued to the interface between the bubble and the air.
I see.
Because
this reminds me of an old backpacking water filter I had years ago by First Need that would purify the water by taking out all the ions. So it would work electrically, and you'd end up with pure H2O. I mean, there was no impurities in it at all.
Yes, the problem is that you want some of those minerals because it's unhealthy to drink just bottled water. I try and turn all my water into either tea or coffee. Okay, I'm a great addict. But
add some minerals back in so you don't kill yourself.
Yeah, keeps me healthy. At least I don't know if my teeth like it, but the rest of me is doing good. Okay, my brain loves it. Okay, so but drinking, just bottled water leaches out all the minerals of the body normally. Anyway, back to the microplastic. This is a worldwide problem. So only this desalination system can address that particular problem, because it's a completely different physics. It's not boiling, like a thermal desalination. It's not filtering, because filters, for the most part, they're not great. The microplastics is too small. They're not designed. Wow. Yeah, they're not designed for the microplastics. And the other aspect is Some of the plastic is big and will just clog up the filters that much faster. You got 20 parts for every cubic meter. So you're going to have a lot more maintenance at the same time. Whereas half of it will go through. And so you're not really fixing the problem. You go from right now 20 down to 10 parts per cubic meter, which still is not safe. Okay. So, I mean, that's definitely cancer causing, okay, to say the least. I don't know all the diseases, autoimmune diseases and everything, related to plastic. And then the different hormone disruptors that are in the plastic.
Right.
So it causes all kinds of developmental problems in the animals and the fish also.
Right, it's a global problem right now. I mean, it's everywhere. No one's avoiding it. Everybody has microplastics in their body at this point.
Yes, but at the same time, we have to address it. We can't just let it keep increasing. And by the way,
there's no choice.
Obviously, an ounce of prevention, is worth a pound of cure. So it's a lot cheaper to deal with it now than let it go in the drinking water of Manila and then pay, the government has to pay all the health benefits for all these people. Okay. The health costs will be in 20 years astronomical. Okay. And God knows all the things. So back to the red sun. So the second part of red sun, of course, is the thermal battery. And you hit it right. It runs both with a thermal molten nickel core at 1800 degrees. It can collect the heat directly from the solar thermal infrared dishes, just like a wick. It can collect the thermal through convective heat transfer because we make special conducting CNT, SWINT, carbon fiber heat pipes. But second of all, the main way that we charge the battery is through EMF crucibles from the mining industry. So in the mining industry, they don't use coke anymore. They don't use coal. They use these EMF crucibles that heat the nickel metal or the steel to 1500 degrees white hot in 2 seconds. And the reason is because nickel in the steel has a particular physics phenomenon called eddy currents. And what it is the molecule of the nickel actually starts wavering when these EMF waves go through the electron shells because there's 2 empty slots in the electron shells. So they start dancing and it's kind of looks like chickens flapping their wings. And so they flap them, of course, close to the speed of sound. And of course, it creates incredible friction. And it turns the metal through this internal friction called eddy currents to white hot in 2 seconds. So
amazing.
It is, yes, and it's 98.6% efficient. That's what's really amazing.
Is that a resonance? The reason why they're moving those electrons, is it resonating with the vibration?
Well, it's resonating back and forth because the electron shell is missing a couple of electrons. So those electrons are dancing from one orbital shell to the other. So you could call it a form of resonance, but what the formal name is eddy currents. You can look that up, eddy currents.
So it's initiated
and it only is a phenomenon with nickel.
It's only initiated by electromagnetic frequencies?
Yes, and it is only particular to nickel. So you have to have 40% nickel in the battery. So we can have any other metal with the nickel, but we have to have nickel inside the battery. Of course, nickel is what forms, stainless steel, is nickel steel. So any kind of stainless steel Of course, we put cheaper metals in some batteries, copper, tin, bronze, aluminum. Okay. Each one has particular temperature differential. So depending on how hot we want the battery to be, we can use these less expensive.
Right. But the end result,
minerals.
these molten metals that you store in like super insulated containers, and it's a heat battery that you can run all kinds of things off of.
Exactly. So, for instance, running the diesel is using compressed air with the heat from the battery. We actually can get twice the energy density of gasoline at 20 megajoules per kilogram. And we just take the air from the atmosphere. Yes, and this is, believe it or not, before your grandfather was born in the 1800s, this is how they ran the trains. You probably never will even hear this except for me. They ran the trains in Switzerland, Europe, America, Britain, Australia, with these compressed air systems.
Sure.
And they heated it with coal, of course. They didn't have red sun batteries. So that's our only innovation, is that we have a clean way to heat the compressed air.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Okay. And these trains ran for the engineering marvels. And of course, they even were running in Los Angeles. You can still see some articles on microfiche called the red lines. Of course, the oil companies tore them out as soon as they had gas stations in the 1900s, or 1905, 1907, around there, 1910. Because they didn't want competition.
Right.
So, but we're bringing them back. And the beauty also with the system using, and what we do is we strip the nitrogen out of the air and just use compressed nitrogen. If you do that, you triple the torque of diesel over gasoline, because diesel, yes, because nitrogen expands 14 to 1500 degrees from cryo-nitrogen or room temperature nitrogen to 200 degrees. It expands 1500 times, whereas gasoline, going from room temperature to 550 degrees, only expands 432 times. So you get 3.5 times more torque. So imagine that on your ship, where you need torque to move that propeller. Okay, you need 15 times more torque to move a ship than a van of the same size on land.
Right.
Because of resistance.
You got to convert these diesel engines out there in the world to run in this way. Is it an expensive conversion, or is it simple?
It's very simple, because they already have rail systems. So we're just connecting the rail system to the heat and pumping in the nitrogen. So the nitrogen now is such a mature science that they have nitrogen conversion systems as big as dishwashers. You can have one in your kitchen, okay? And it's automatically, electrically taking the air and stripping out the oxygen, and taking 78% is N2, and just compressing that with normal compressors. So this is a very easy known science. So everything is off the shelf that I've been telling you, except for obviously the receivers for the infrared dishes and troughs and the battery. But every other part is off the shelf.
So it's really exciting.
Turbine.
For me, like, I've been coming out of like 20 years, I've been studying just appropriate technology and how to, not only save the world, but save myself. How can I have autonomous systems to run my off-grid home, for example, and something that I can fix myself and create myself. And I've come up with a number of great options. I had like a combined heat and power system that I was working on in the past in my last homestead, you know, using like biogas and masonry heater, boiler, and wood gasification. I've been studying, you know, solar concentrators, and everything that you're saying, it's so revolutionary what you're doing on many levels, and these many different technologies that you're working with, they're all revolutionary. I want to see how somebody like me could potentially use some of what you're working with on a small single family home scale. So that's what I'm kind of curious about. Maybe you can respond to that.
Yes, well, we make a smaller red sun called power source. And actually the smallest unit is for the home. It's about 3.6 kilowatts. That's as small as we can make a thermal battery, because if you make it so small, you can't keep it thermal. You know, you have to have a certain amount of space because
Sure.
of the physics of it, and you need a certain amount of metal. You can't do it like, you know, in the palm of your hand. You know, it needs to be like, you know, 5 or 6 thermal, you know, thermoses worth. Okay.
That's to have like thermal
maybe,
inertia, like a certain amount of mass.
yeah, to have the thermal inertia. You got it right. And so, you know, that's like as big as, let's say, 2 fire extinguishers. Okay. Something like that. And that's 3.6 kilowatts. Now, this can run, like you were saying, a small, very cheap steam engine for the house, which is what I was thinking for the house, because they're the cheapest. And they make very nice little ones now. You know, actually, India is the best place I found to get cheap ones, big and small.
Yeah.
Because they, you know, the British brought them over like 300 years ago, and so they're still making them. Okay.
Either or, steam or
engine. Any heat engine. I was going to mention, you know, we have a patent also for the Brayton cycle, which is your jet engines. These, of course, are the more efficient ones. And yeah, if you have more money, then you can go to a more efficient small turbine. For instance, Blade On is a company name. They run 2 Blade On turbines, which are as the diameter of a pencil, in your Jaguar electric sports car. And they use the Blade-Ons with a little bit of kerosene to charge the battery. So these 2 Blade-Ons are charging the battery, whereas we can put a red sun or a power source and they wouldn't need kerosene. But in any case, they make a very nice little package, which would be perfect for your house. You know, you just, you know, get rid of the Jaguar and just you can go right to Blade On and order these turbines, you know, and they could fit basically in your post box. Okay, they're so small.
Wow.
So yeah, they're tiny, you know, but they're super efficient, and that's the point. But with the you know, power source, you have plenty of extra energy, so you can go obviously to a cheaper steam turbine also, and not have a lot of maintenance worries.
What do you think about the thermoelectric panels? They're electrical panels that you know, they generate electricity with the hot side and the cold side. Have you used those much?
No, but I've been reading about them, and I think that will be the future. Also, I've been reading about these perovskite, you know, solar PV modules going up to 27% efficiency, and you know, they're figuring out how to make them stable. So I think all these, there's no one silver bullet. So the beauty of the red sun and the power source system is they're compatible with all systems. They're super compatible with all. Like, for instance, you can take your hot PV solar thermal panel, which will heat the, let's say your heating fluid, whatever it is, your refrigerant or your hot oil or whatever you're using as a thermal transfer medium, and then heat it up the rest of the way that you need, give it a boost with the red sun or the power source battery. So you can run your steam turbine at, let's say, 300 degrees or 350 and get a lot more efficiency.
Okay.
Also, the hotter you can go, the cheaper your engine is going to cost. It's very expensive to run low temperature turbines and engines, and they most of the time require these organic refrigerants, which cost a fortune and always leak. And so you have to replace them every 2 years. That costs more than the steam turbine costs in the first place. Whereas you could buy a steam turbine for like $300 and it'll last for 50 years. Okay. But it needs 350 degrees. Okay. So if you can provide the 350 degrees, this is much more cost efficient, in terms of the CapEx.
Yeah.
And the maintenance. And of course, people don't know how to work on engines. They don't know how to work on cars. There's no dealer that they can go to. Oh, how do I fix my Stirling? How do I, oh, this thing is not flowing. Oh, it's leaking. Oh, yeah. Oh, the organic refrigerator is $500. Oh, there's just a million of problems. You're not a rich industry that can afford to fix a turbine, low temperature turbine, which costs $4,200 per kilowatt, by the way, in the first place.
Yeah, people need really simple, easy to fix, low cost. If you have to replace a part, you should be able to make that part at home in 30 minutes.
Yeah. Only a steam turbine fits that definition, Scott. So that's why I'm saying they can take their let's say they're putting out 110 degrees off their roof and then give it a kick with the power source battery and kick it up to 350. That'll save maybe 1/3 of the energy, but it's not enough to run anything, Okay, it'll run a stir line, but barely. It's not going to make enough really to run a house at 110, unless you got like a bunch of them, like 10 of them, and then it'll cost more than anything. So really, this same question I came to early because in my first incarnation, as you know, I was working on these low-cost houses. And the true story of why I also started to go back to the energy business is I was working, thanks to my wife, who was best friends with the vice president of Dominican Republic. The aunt to the vice president is the architect of Dominican Republic, and she made friends with my wife, who's a Barcelona architect, my ex-wife, Ina, who's still the architect for our company. And so the long story short is that the president of Dominican Republic offered us 10,000 hectares, to build our eco homes, after we made a really nice presentation and showed all the houses we can make for, $18,000 and blah, blah, blah. But of course, the property had no water and no power. Okay.
I see.
And so again, I was smashed against the wall. Now what? And this was before Red Sun. This is back in 2009, 2010. So right after that, I think it was like the next month, kind of like the algae thing, I started trying to look for a solution. And of course, magnetically attracted the solution and the right people and 10 years later, I met Dan. Okay.
I see. I see. Right. Your composite panel homes, it's like they cost $18,000. It takes 3 days to build one. Isn't that right? 2-bedroom home.
Yeah. The problem is
save
it takes, like, in today's world, like, 30,000 for the electrical system, so that ain't gonna work. So
yeah.
So I have to go back to the beginning. And second of all, trying to put, let's say, water meters alone in a subdivision, that's like $22,000 per meter. Again, another no-go. How do you solve this problem? So again, you need this desalination. And by the way, our cost to desalinate with the solar infrared desalination is about 34 cents a cubic meter.
Wow.
So it's like
That's a lot cheaper.
Yes. So
like
imagine you have
times cheaper, actually.
Exactly. So now I'm ready for that 10,000 hectares. Well, where's Zion now? Where's the president of Dominican Republic like 12, 13 years later? Okay. So we moved on, so now I'm in the Philippines. Okay. But set to do the same thing on a different level. And of course, we're focusing now on an even more, I think, worldwide crisis, which is the massive inflation in food prices, and caused almost solely because of the massive increase in energy and fertilizer prices. Okay, that's what's setting the price of food. The cost to run a tractor on your land is horrific. But the cost now of fertilizer basically is putting farmers out of business. Okay. So the problem is always energy. The currency of the world is energy. So that's what Red Sun's mission is now, the primary mission, which leads to housing, which leads to food, which leads, through the ammonia production to fuels for ships and for planes, and the battery solution to retrofit to all existing trains, buses, ships. And again, combining that as a compatible system for houses is, as I showed you, the low-cost way. We're not in manufacturing, mass manufacturing. I'm hoping to achieve that goal this year through contracts here. And also I'm getting support from Saudi Arabia, because obviously water and fertilizers is a really big deal over there too. And for the Red Sun. And also we're going to be making the Tesla turbine also, which is another great turbine to have in the house, which, by the way, would work on almost any energy.
Tesla turbine is useful in so many applications.
Absolutely. So we're planning to make them in Thailand. Actually, our CTO, Jack Wong, he's a professor of electrical engineering. And also he's the head of the solar committee of Thailand. And he's written the Red Sun into the laws of Thailand, into the renewable energy law, including the battery and the dishes. So we're fully approved there. And we have a project ready to go in Cambodia on the border of Thailand, 300 hectares with a permit finally. So we're ready to take off in Thailand and also do some desalination in Samui, where they've run out of water.
So yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, Samui now is at about 60% water capacity. So they're missing water most of the week or half the week. We're starting to get to that level here. When I left Majorca also, they were at 50% water capacity in October last year. So they're in a super drought in Spain. So these super droughts are the norm now. Yeah. So again, the desalination has become a really big focus because I'm kind of adjusting to where the biggest crisis is. Okay.
Okay.
Energy and water. So I figure that my life is getting short. I better focus on the big problems. The housing is my love, but it's not the big problem.
I see.
Anybody can build a low-cost house, really, once I give them, the material to help them, but they don't know how to power it. Like I didn't know, 12 years ago, and they certainly don't know how to make water cheaper. Okay.
Exactly.
So
that's what I
we
said.
have to go to
15 years ago, I decided to design the regenerative home, and I realized that the structure of the house it's elegant and the design's great, but the systems are what really count. So I think home designs are going to move
absolutely
a type of structure that can adopt the latest technology that's coming out rapidly, better and better technology for the home systems. It has to be interchangeable.
Yes, but it has to be interchangeable, just like Red Sun, with the old analog systems. Your friend that was introducing that very fancy heat pump is a good example. See, his system was like $30,000. Again, that's not going to solve any problems. Whereas in Thailand, Jack has introduced me to a guy. In fact, I'll give you the website after this. Intelligent Homes, and he's developed a heat pump system that even runs the air conditioning, and the system costs no more than like $2,000, basically using barrels and plastic tubs and normal PVC, and so how to plug in the Red Sun or the power source battery and the various components we have into low-cost systems so that the whole house, for instance, he makes his house out of styrofoam-filled fiberglass panels. The whole outside of the house, the whole casing, the whole shell is $600. And that's a lot in Thailand. Okay. So, that's why German systems are not going to Thailand. Okay, so we have to reinvent analog, old style systems with, like you said, new technologies that plug in. Now inside the house, he's got all digital electronics, thanks to Jack. He's got digital refrigerators, digital coffee makers, digital making water from the air. Okay, everything is digital. So of course he uses almost no energy. He's got digital security, digital TV, digital computer, every appliance, even digital laundry. Okay, I got pictures of it, which uses like less energy than your old CD player. Okay, to do.
Wow, way more efficient.
It's super efficient. That's what we need. We need to, but we still have to spin the laundry. We don't want to reinvent the laundry. We don't want to reinvent the heat pump because it costs $30,000. We want to use old heat pumps, but redo it in a smarter way. Yeah. So I find that mixing, and I guess that's why it takes an old cocker like me, from the old generation, studying under masters, so that I can figure out how to plug into the new generation of devices and digital devices. And I'm still stumped in some ways, but that's why I built this team of amazing people like Dr. Jack Wong and Dan Winter. Okay, and so I still need them, in my weak areas. But I know enough chemistry, so I can reinvent catalysts. Okay, I can reinvent, energy systems. I'm going to retrace my steps now and talk again about what this new catalyst does in an old 180-year-old pyrolysis system. So basically, the catalyst used in normal pyrolysis now at a higher temperature. So instead of doing pyrolysis at 650, we're doing it at 950, so that we're turning all the CO2 hydrogen. Second of all, the catalyst also works amazingly well with some other calcium minerals in basically reforming the nitrogen into ammonia. So the catalyst is working in two areas. So instead of doing the old Haber-Bosch process of making ammonia, I actually are about to reinvent the ammonia process. So instead of needing 400 degrees, just like our desal can work at only 200 degrees, now I could do the Haber-Bosch impersonation at 50 degrees. So that saves like 7 times on the energy. You know, you only have to hit it with 50 degrees, and I could do it at atmospheric pressure.
Outstanding.
Instead of having to do it at 200 bars. That's a huge difference in the equipment.
Outstanding.
So yes, so now you're saving like 50 times or 40 times on the energy to create the same molecules and the same volume. So again, using new chemistry, new tricks, like you said, new technology, okay, but to do the old same processes. We're not reinventing the nitrogen conversion, we're just bringing it down to room temperature, you know, and to atmospheric pressure. So we don't need expensive reactors and a lot of pipes and a lot of extra problems. And by the way, the safety goes up like 100 times too. You know, that can kill somebody if something went wrong, you know. And it can leak, okay, and all kinds of things when you're under pressure. So this is the kind of innovation that our group is specializing in. And we're kind of like the Apple of the energy business, in that we're you know, reinventing the telephone. In this case, we're reinventing the pyrolysis system completely, so that now we're able to produce 18 tons of hydrogen a day from 700 tons of seaweed. And so with that, we can make 200,000 tons of fertilizer every year at a cost of 1/3 the cost of market fertilizer, which is anhydrous ammonia is going for $700 a ton here. So we're at $190 a ton. So that's kind of setting the clock back like 50 years, okay? Giving farmers another chance, okay? So, and giving us, the ones that are buying this food, by the way, you and I, and the middle class, you know, imagine trying to raise kids today, forget it, okay? So this is how I can see that we're getting through the next millennium here. Because if we leave it to the experts, we're not going to make it even a decade. So that's what I see.
Yeah,
you know, the political powers.
Well, this is all
it's exponential.
Inspiring. I mean, just super inspiring. You know, just to know that you're doing this work with your team. Everybody needs to hear about this. So I'm going to get this video out to everyone. And
all right,
really incredible stuff, Jay. And I'm just happy to have met you and to hopefully be working with you more and more in the future. So,
well, like I said, you're going to be our rep for that part of the world. I don't plan to come back to the United States, So you're it for the West Coast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ready to help.
And Dan won't come either. Dan and I are staying out. Okay. And staying on. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Who knows? I might be joining you. You're not sure. So.
Yeah, I invite you. In fact, when you see these intelligent homes, you may want to take a tour of Thailand just to see these houses. They're incredible. And they have a house attached to a greenhouse. Every house has its own greenhouse because in the future you have to grow your own food. You can't go to the supermarket. Forget it. You can't afford it. You got to grow your own.
Exactly.
So this has a digital greenhouse and a digital chicken coop. Okay, it's incredible.
You know, even in a hot place, like all of my home designs have greenhouses either next to it or attached to the house, because even in a hot place, you can use the excess heat that's captured by the greenhouse to draw cool air into the house, right? So it's passive cooling.
Exactly.
Using heat. It's wonderful.
Exactly. And also with the heat pump too, you got excess heat. And so they're running the greenhouse. They got everything is digitized. So you'll be very inspired. And my hat's off to Jack. And it's even charging one of those, you know, they have those 3-wheel tricycles there in Thailand. So he made a digital tricycle. So it's even charging. The house is even charging the tricycle. Okay.
Perfect.
So, yes. You know, and his electric bill is negative every month. They have to pay him several dollars. Yeah. So it's the way we need to be. Here we have more wind, so we have to build more in my style on the shell of the house. But everything is perfect in this house. So I basically want to steal everything from the house and add the battery and my, you know, steam engine and you know, blessed, you know, have like, you know, a few normal appliances. Thank you. You know, and maybe, you know, a couple other things that suck some power, air conditioning and such. Although they had developed that pretty well.
I want you to tell the audience how they can look you guys up online.
Well, we have several websites. Energime, of course, is the primary website still. The new company was just formed a couple weeks ago called Red Star Energime Green Group. So as soon as I have the website built for the corporation, I'll send you a link. Okay. But they can go to Energime, you know, the agriculture, which we're presenting the imploder next week also to them. They absolutely want it here in the Philippines.
You're talking theimploder.com?
Yes.
Dan Winter. Yeah, shout out to Dan Winter for introducing us.
Yes, and he's still my hero.
He's an essential member.
In every way. And he is such a spiritual force also. It's very inspiring. So I still almost weekly get inspiration from him.
Yeah, me too.
So,
I mean, I didn't even know him. He didn't know who I was. And I just said, hey, I'm coming to France to meet you. And he said, great. You know, and we had a great time. They welcomed us into their home, and they're just such wonderful people, Dan Winter and Valerie.
Yeah, they are. But imagine if you're a scientist studying him, it's like ecstasy every day, you know.
Completely.
He's so deep. I can't even tell you all the things that I'm going to be inventing in my next generation from all the information I've sucked up from him.
I only have a few more minutes, so do you have any last comments you want to leave the audience with?
Well, I do want to say that we've built an extraordinary team of people, and so we are going to be building a power plant next in Cambodia. We have 135 megawatt approved there after 7 years. And actually the next generation molten salt reactor is what we're going to build. which is a thorium nuclear reactor. So this is going to be a first of its kind for Asia, and actually, except for the Chinese, the first commercial thorium reactor ever built anywhere. And this was developed originally by the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, believe it or not, in the 50s, and was tested successfully in 2 reactors for 9 years, and then dropped because this reactor doesn't make nuclear bomb material. So, of course, you know the history of our country, that had to be done away with. So it was buried.
I've
So
heard
we're
of
bringing that
thorium, and I
back.
know it's illegal to buy or sell thorium, but if you're a chemist, you can make it yourself.
Well, it's not illegal here, and actually the Philippine government has been asking for it, and they're passing legislation, which we'll soon be able to build one here also. In fact, 2 American companies interviewed Marcos Jr. when he came to America and proposed building these, not thorium, but uranium small nuclear reactors, and one building a 4th generation reactor, which is molten salt. So these run on molten salt, again, at 1 atmosphere instead of pressurized to 3,000 psi as all other light water reactors in the world. So they're not dangerous. They don't require these big containment domes. The salt sticks all the nuclear material so it can't leak out. And since it's at, atmospheric pressure, there's nothing pressurizing it to leak out. It's also incredibly safe. It has very low maintenance. And like I said, it ran successfully in 2 reactors in America. So they have 400 years of reactor years operation.
Okay.
And still nobody's built one. Why? So I'll leave you with that.
That's outstanding. Wow. I applaud you, sir.
Okay.
Thanks for your dedication and just the inspiration and everything you've taught me. I really appreciate this. And thanks for
Okay,
being
the
on the
adventure
show.
continues. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, we'll have you back on the show. We'll get more into it. Obviously, we have a lot more to talk about.
Oh yeah, we'll have some progress next time.
Okay.
Talk to
Thanks
you
again,
later,
Jay.
Scott.